This week, we're going to be doing something a little different here on Rewind Toys. We're going to be asking you, the viewers, to cast your votes as we decide together what the number one action figure line of the 80s was. Yep, you heard me. This week on Rewind Toys, we're doing Battle of the 80s action figures. All right, so I misled you a little bit. We've already picked. We're going to go through our criteria here, and we're going to let you know which one we think reigns supreme. But over on Facebook, also on Instagram, you guys can go drop your comments and let us know your thoughts. We've said this a couple of times. Please be nice in the comments. We don't need a lot of hate thrown around here. This is all just for fun. Everybody has an opinion, and it's okay. We want to hear yours. Just be nice to everybody, damn it. All right, so we can't discuss every single action figure line, but let's be honest. I think we can all agree on a few. So we're going to be going with what we consider kind of the big hitters here, which I will list in a moment. And we base those off our criteria. So what is that criteria? You might be asking that, and at this point, you probably should be asking that. We had to establish some rules when looking at these lines because I think it'd be easy just to say things like, well, that one sold the most, therefore it wins. And we're not going to do that. What we're doing is breaking down the pros and the cons and picking our toy line that overall was kind of the best of the best in all the areas. So we assigned the criteria and we gave each thing 5 points, and then we kind of deducted as we saw fit. So the criteria that we set is it's going to be kind of like how they look. So the sculpt, we're going to talk about the overall functionality of the toy itself, like how playable was it? Like, could you actually maneuver it and pose it? We're going to talk about the overall construction. Was it constructed well? The playability factor. Could you play with this toy? I mean, was it something that you could actually get your hands on and play with, or did it just sort of lay there? We want to talk about the variety. How much did they offer in this toy line? Staying power. Did this toy stick around? Is it still around today? Do people still love it? And we're going to talk about the overall popularity of the toy line, especially when it was out, but again, over time. Here's the big one, and we thought a lot about this. The toy line has to have begun between 1980 and 1989. Sorry, Star Wars. Couldn't put you in here. You started before the 80s. Oh, and we're doing action figures primarily, so nothing else today. Again, we had to narrow it down. All right, so I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. This is just for fun. I welcome comments. I welcome opinions. Actually, we love the comments, and we love the opinions. We love the discussion. But there's absolutely no reason to get bent out of shape over any of this. There's really no reason to get angry at all. You're allowed to disagree, and those conversations are always welcome. I personally am not so set in my ways that I refuse to see a good point if one is made. But I am set in my ways enough that I will delete any hate-filled or insulting comments, because much like He-Man, when it comes to this channel, I have the power. And honestly, guys, we're all here for fun. We're all here to enjoy toys. That's what we're here for. All right, so maybe you've looked at the thumbnail and you kind of know what we're going to be talking about, but let's go ahead and fill you guys in on the 5 lines we're going to be stacking up against each other today. And I want to be very clear, there's a reason we picked the lines we picked. All right, the 5 lines are Masters of the Universe, G.I. Joe, The Transformers, M.A.S.K, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There were a few I did consider that didn't kind of make it, like the real Ghostbusters, Voltron, Thundercats, Silverhawks, probably a few more beyond those, but let's be honest, these are all awesome toys, but in the end, they probably wouldn't beat out these top 5. Now, some of you may be like, well, that's my favorite, it would, but again, we can't, it's the ones we picked. Now, I want to make one more thing clear. I'm not saying these were my favorite lines particularly, although I will say they were all up there, especially Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and M.A.S.K. I loved those. But these are some of the biggest that meet our overall criteria, so that's why these got picked. Now, we're going to start with Mo2. Masters of the Universe, released by Mattel in 1981, they are, without question, one of the most famous action figures in toy history. Although I will say a different one on our list might just take the number one spot after Star Wars. Star Wars is probably the most famous action figure in history. But again, they couldn't make the list. Motu's peak era ran from 1981 through 1988. And in that time, 72 individual figures were released and are considered the OG run. Of course, that doesn't include vehicles, playsets, and variants. The sculpt details, they looked good. I mean, mostly. They did get a bit lazy with paint from time to time, and swapping parts was extremely common, so that is a small issue. As an example, the same basic body was used for He-Man, Man-at-Arms, and Merman. The scale of the figures, 5.5 inches, was completely new, giving them a bulkier, tougher look, but they did use existing toys for some things. They weren't overly articulated, but they often came with really cool accessories. Aside from the rubber that connected their legs, the construction was fairly durable. They were fun to collect and fun to play with. They offered a variety of different figures that made sense to the line, and since they're still making these today, I'd say staying power is for sure. Between 1981 and 1988, it's estimated the line generated revenue of over $1 billion. We've had 2 live-action films and several animated series. So personally, I would give the following scores. For sculpt, I would give a 3.5 out of 5. For functionality, I would give a 4 out of 5. For construction, I would give a 4.5 out of 5. For playability, we would give a 4 out of 5. Variety, 4 out of 5. Popularity, 5 out of 5. Staying power, 5 out of 5. So that comes to a score of 30 out of 35. That's a pretty good score, and if they keep this up, I mean, it's going to be hard to top, but we're going to see what happens next. Next up, we're going to be talking about G.I. Joe. So G.I. Joe is considered the second most famous action figure line of all time. Again, after Star Wars. Like, honestly, it would be hard. Like, I don't collect Star Wars, but I know if Star Wars was on here, it would probably just annihilate this whole thing. So it's good that it didn't make it into the 80s, because this just wouldn't be as much fun. And no, it's not my opinion that it's the second most famous action figure line of all time. This is actually verifiable. Now, we're not looking at the 12-inch original action figure Joes. We're talking about G.I. Joe, a real American hero, which is considered to have run from 1982 through 1994. Between 1982 and 1994, somewhere in the range of 520 to 550 figures were released. Now, that's just crazy. Now, it's believed to have been the 74 Microman line that first introduced the 3 3/4 inch figures, but it was G.I. Joe that set it as the industry standard. They also added that O-ring construction to hold the torso and limbs together, and a swivel arm battle grip, which offered improved posability and durability, although those O-rings would wear out, leaving with 2 halves of a figure. Yes, they can be replaced, but still it was annoying when it happened. The sculpts and the overall details looked really good, and I will say that those details, compared to Motu, probably a little bit better overall, but once again, mold sharing was very common. For the first 16 figures, only 3 head molds with simple repaints were created. And one of the things I will say is that with such a vast line over the years, it was easier to kind of part swap and still feel more original, but the part swapping did happen a lot. And in a few of the later series, all it was repainted older figures. So they had an amazing variety of characters to choose from, sometimes almost too much, but most of them, they made sense. They functioned well, fit their vehicle, and had great accessories. They were durable, not as durable as Motu, but good. All the different figures, playsets, and vehicles allowed you to enact multiple storylines. The G.I. Joe concept has had a lot of staying power for sure. Like Motu, there have been several animated series, a couple of live action films, and an animated movie. However, Motu's initial design have stayed mostly consistent, whereas G.I. Joe has changed a little bit over the years. Some figures were updated, but the overall aesthetic tends to remain intact. G.I. Joe has gone through a number of iterations, but they're still here, they're still sticking around. As for popularity, well, you already know where they rank technically, but between 1982 and 1989, they generated approximately $1 billion for Hasbro. So here is our personal ranking. For Sculpt, we're going to give them a 3.5 out of 5. For functionality, a 4 out of 5. Overall construction, 4 out of 5. Playability, 4.5 out of 5. Variety, we're going to give them a 5 out of 5. For popularity, 5 out of 5. For staying power, we're going to give them a 4.5 out of 5. That's a total score of 30.5 out of 35. So for us, just edging over Motu overall. All right, let's go ahead and move on and enter the Transformers. All right, so right up front, I would argue Transformers has more staying power overall, like for today, than both Motu and G.I. Joe. There have been a number of animated films. There's several live action films, even the bad ones. Recent animated movie, which was awesome, by the way. So if you haven't watched Transformers 1, you're doing yourself a disservice. And there are so many different, just Transformer toy lines that still exist and are still being made, different ones, offshoots. So they're crazy. So we did a full episode on the Transformers, which you can find right there if you want to go watch that. But the Generation 1 line ran from 1984 through 1990 in the US and up to 1992 in Europe and 1993 in Japan. Now, as far as how many were released in that time frame, somewhere in the range of 812 figures and accessories with nearly 450 distinct characters. Look, even the 1984 launch was no slouch, dropping 28 figures. Of course, they weren't the most original concepts, having been cribbed from existing Japanese lines like Diaclone and Microchange, and honestly, some of those early sculpts, they weren't very good. I give you Ratchet and Ironhide as examples. Even Cliffjumper and Bumblebee were a bit of a letdown, but they still looked good overall, and the details were nice. If we're to be honest, they didn't function all that great either, with some of them having difficulty standing once in their robot form. But there were others that were just, amazing. Jetfire, the Dinobots, Soundwave, and Blaster are probably some of my favorites and likely some of yours. As for construction, they were solid. Some metal parts mixed in there. Yes, they could break easy, but only because they were articulated, which is a plus, and even broken, they all still kind of worked. Playability. All right, let's be real here. Playability with the Transformer figures wasn't great. Yes, we all had imagination, so we made it work, but the act of actually transforming them took too long, so we typically just didn't do it. And again, as robust as they were, they could be a bit flimsy in certain parts. Still, we did play with them and we did love them. They were and still are hugely popular, especially to collectors. As far as money, in its initial run, the G1 line earned just a smidge under $1 billion in 5 years, which in today's money is around $2.6 billion. Not too shabby there, Hasbro. So here's my personal ranking on the Transformers. For Sculpt, we're going to give them a 3 out of 5. This was difficult because, as I mentioned, some of them are great, but overall, there were a few duds. Functionality, we're going to give them a 3.5 out of 5. For construction, we're going a 4 out of 5. For playability, we're going 3.5 out of 5. As far as variety, these guys knocked it out of the park, 5 out of 5. Same with popularity, 5 out of 5. And staying power, 5 out of 5. That is a total score of 26 out of 35. I realize it probably falls a little lower than you guys thought, but when talking about the criteria, the molds, the functionality, they really took a hit in those areas. Hey guys, if you're still watching up to this point, I hope you are. And if you've been checking us out from week to week, do us a really quick favor. Drop down, hit that subscribe button, maybe even give us, the thumbs up. It's all free for you to do, and it helps us out a lot. And there's some really cool stuff coming in the future. And if you're watching the show, you'll know all about it. So if you have like 2 seconds, thumbs up, subscribe. We really appreciate it. Let's get back to the battle. All right, so the next one on here might be one you weren't expecting. Maybe, if you were around and you knew the 80s, you're not going to be too shocked by this. But some of you who are more modern, modern vintage collectors, I don't know if that makes sense, but you might not think of M.A.S.K very often. But M.A.S.K was a really popular toy line in the 80s, and there's a reason why it's going to make the list today. M.A.S.K stands for Mobile Armored Strike Command with a K. We did do an episode on M.A.S.K as well, one of our really early ones, but you can go check that out. This Kenner line had the shortest run of all the lines we're going to be discussing today. It launched in 1985 and hit the third and final wave in 1988. Overall, there were around 50 different vehicles. There were accessory packs, a few play sets, and then a few loose figures you could buy. Well, not loose figures, but single figures you could buy. Stacked up against the other 4 on this list, I would say M.A.S.K functions the best. The vehicles did what they were supposed to do, transforming into their alter egos in ways that made sense and felt right. The vehicles were sculpted great too, and they looked like their cartoon counterparts. As for the figures, the clothing and the mask details were fantastic, but they did lack a tiny bit in the heads, mostly because of their size. M.A.S.K figures were smaller than other figures, but I actually think that helped them out a little bit. You lost detail, but functionality and playability kind of steps up. As for construction, Kenner understood the assignment when it came to construction. You might find a Thunderhawk today missing a gull wing door or a Condor with a broken blade, but the general construction of the vehicles will still be intact. And the figures, well, they held up really well. They were lighter on accessories than pretty much any of the other lines, but they didn't really need a lot, and really playing with these was just some of my favorite play as a kid. Mainly because you could actually do with the M.A.S.K toy what they did in the cartoon, and it didn't take you 10 minutes. You transform the vehicle and pretend it was flying, and it all worked well. The vehicles worked in either mode. The figures were simple enough to move around and set up, and the idea behind what the masks and vehicles could do offered plenty in the way of make-believe scenarios. The variety of types of vehicles and abilities was great, and they were always releasing new ones in both larger and smaller scale, meaning I was actually able to talk my mom into buying one of these on occasion, because sometimes, there were big ones that maybe your parents wouldn't, but there were smaller ones that you could actually get, and they were still cool. So Kenner has never fully disclosed their financial earnings for the M.A.S.K toy line, so it's difficult to say, but the line, at least the first 2 waves, was a huge hit for Kenner. The later split seconds didn't do as well in the US as they did overseas, but they have since gained some popularity, especially with collectors. As for staying power, M.A.S.K hasn't done quite as well as the rest of these. Again, big in the 80s, but didn't really stick around and didn't get the iterations that so many of these other, actually pretty much all of these other lines got. No movie yet, no series revivals, but we do have the Loyal Subjects Wave 1 and just launched Wave 2. These are re-releases which appear to be selling out almost immediately. They look fantastic. If you are a M.A.S.K fan and you haven't seen these, you need to check them out. I can't afford them personally because they're really expensive, but they're very cool. So with all that in mind, let's rank this one. For sculpt, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 5. I thought about 4.5, but again, there's some lack of detail in the face. For functionality, we're giving them a 5 out of 5. Overall construction, 5 out of 5. Playability, 5 out of 5. Variety, we're going to go 4 out of 5. Popularity, we're going to go probably a 4 out of 5. Again, popularity at the time. But staying power, we're going to have to drop it to a 3 out of 5. They just didn't stick around like the rest. That gives us a score of 30 out of 35. All right, let's bring this episode home with our final toy line. We're going to take a look at Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Breaking out in 1988, the initial run of toys went all the way up to 1997. In that run, there are somewhere near 400 figures. Then we have vehicles and play sets to add on top of that. So first, let's talk about sculpts. In case you did not know, and you didn't watch our video on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first run of figures and the cartoon were being developed at the same time, which meant final cartoon character designs were only sort of known. Because of that, they took some inspiration from the comics. What that means is they did not look exactly like the cartoon. But for me, it actually worked in favor. And let's face it, the sculpts of the figures are fantastic. Aside from Shredder. Shredder not only does not look like his cartoon counterpart, he doesn't really look like the comic book counterpart, and the pose is obnoxious. Aside from him, though, Playmates kind of nailed it, as they did with functionality and playability. These figures stood well, they displayed nice, and they were easy to play with. Now, more detail in the weapons would have been nice, as they were all sort of this generic brown color, at least at first. I know later in the series they cleaned some of that up. But they did give you a bunch of weapons and accessories with the characters, so that was a plus. The TMNT line is sturdy. These guys were built to last. You find them missing accessories and their belts from time to time, but aside from Triceraton, whose tail is always freaking broken, they stay mostly intact. Variety with TMNT, it's never been a problem. In fact, I would say the sheer number of characters, well, that's the problem for collectors. It is insane. There's the Universal Monster Turtles, Farmer Turtles, Space Turtles, Sports Turtles, Caveman, Wacky Action, Talking Turtles, and so many mutant characters. I mean, how do you keep up? It's believed there are around 1,200 unique TMNT action figures in all. If you're a completist, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for you. Popularity, well, there was the comic, which exploded onto the scene. The cartoon, the 89 film, which is one of the highest grossing independent films of all time. There were 2 sequels. There are the newer films, the live action series. There were various animated series, the live coming out of their shell tour, the new animated film, and more movies in the works currently. Not to mention video games and, all the like. So yeah, it was popular. It is popular, and I think it will continue to be popular. TMNT also changed the entire genre and set forth a new set of rules. I mean, there were so many copycats, and we've talked about several of them on this show. All right, so let's go ahead and give our numbers. I might catch some flack here, but again, I praise the toys for being in between the comic and the series. But Shredder. For the overall sculpt, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 5. For functionality, I'm going to give them a 4.5 out of 5. Overall construction, they're going to get a 5 out of 5 from me, as they are with playability, 5 out of 5. Variety, I don't think there's any way to argue this, 5 out of 5. Same with popularity. I mean, we hit on everything, all the areas they've sort of permeated, so they're going to get a 5 out of 5 for popularity, and they're going to get a 5 out of 5 for staying power because they've never gone away and have had numerous imitators. That is a score of 33.5 out of 35. So yeah, for my numbers, I have to give it to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. At first, I was afraid I was being biased, as these are one of my favorite lines still today to collect. But then I realized they're one of my favorite lines because they're one of the best overall toy lines. I mean, it is hard to argue. I think that even if you don't agree with me, which is okay, by the way, leave it in the comments. But even if you don't agree overall, you have to agree they are up there. You have to agree they deserve to be in the top 5. But like I said, of course, you do not have to agree with my overall pick. That's okay. I want to hear your thoughts and your arguments as to why you would pick what you would pick in the comments. Again, don't be rude, but let us know. I would love to hear that. Just remember, we're all here to have a good time, and I want to take everyone's thoughts and opinions into account. I love talking toys. I love to know what lines you guys are passionate about. I love when you guys leave me comments with your stories and your memories on certain lines. It's like one of my favorite things to see. So I welcome it. Again, you can leave comments here. I have posted in the Facebook group and the Instagram, so you can join us there and leave comments there as well. And in a couple of weeks, I'm going to tally up your choices. I'm going to see what you guys said overall, and we're going to announce what the audience pick was. So maybe you guys will agree with me, maybe you won't. We'll give it a couple of weeks, and then I'll let you know what overall you guys thought. Anyway, guys, I really had fun doing this and looking into all of these lines. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you come back. I hope you've hit subscribe. And let me know if there's a specific line you would like to delve into sometime here in the future. I've got a list that's probably already on it, but it might not be. Every once in a while, somebody throws something weird at me. If you're going through and you see one, you're like, I don't know that line very well. That's probably the video you should watch, because there are some really cool lines out there that you might get to discover that you didn't even know existed. Thanks again, guys. I hope you come back next week. And remember, until that time, when it comes to battling out these awesome 80s action figure lines, the hunt, it is still half the fun.